Alright, for this Best of 2022 episode, it's probably a category which, if you know me, we should have done maybe in the first week of this year-long odyssey. But for the category this time, it's going to be my favorite roguelikes of 2022. An unusual twist this year, there really weren't as many roguelikes, roguelites, and so on that came out. Probably because everyone's distracted by the Bullet Heavens, Vampire Survivor likes. But if you have a favorite roguelike, let me know in the comments down below. For the honorable mentions, I'm going to give it to Rogue Legacy 2, the sequel to kind of the game that jump-started the whole roguelite side of things back in the early 2010s. This sequel is essentially Rogue Legacy, but with a far better aesthetic. Love the animations and some of the details of the game. And of course, more classes, including a pizza class, which, as it turns out, as we all know, pizza is overpowered. While Rogue Legacy 2 doesn't exactly reinvent the wheel or kind of iterate the design further, it's still a very well executed game. If you love roguelites and if you really enjoyed Rogue Legacy 1, this is definitely an easy pick for you. Coming in at number 3 for this list, I'm going to give it to Revita. This was one of those games I really enjoyed, although the audience here probably got tired of 2D side-scrolling shooter-likes. But this is a very solid action roguelike, where the charm of it definitely comes with the storytelling and some of the varieties of weapons and strategies. What keeps it from getting higher on the list is simply because it doesn't have as much variance, I think, compared to some of the other roguelikes. And it got to the point that I was like at a persistent difficulty like 15, 18, something like that. And that was the point where it was finally starting to get hard. But more often than not, it kind of fell to getting a very specific set of items or knowing what I needed to win, focusing on that, and then you guessed it, winning. But there is a silver lining. The developer has spent the majority of 2022 working on a big 2.0 update to the game, which is going to be kind of like almost like part DLC, part expansion levels, redesigning and updating a lot of the UI and UX, adding more content, bosses, all that good stuff. And it does sound like it's going to be almost like a second launch of the game. So maybe I'll just copy and paste this section for 2023's best roguelike. But if you are looking for an action roguelike along these styles and you did not check out Revita, I do recommend it. For number 2 and number 1 this year, we have two very different takes on roguelike design. And I was kind of going back and forth between which one I wanted to make number 1 and number 2. But ultimately I decided on the game that offers more in terms of variance and replayability. So with that said, coming in at number 2 for Best Roguelike of 2022, I'm giving it to Dome Keeper. Dome Keeper is kind of like a combination of a tower defense last stand with Dig Dug. Your mission is to explore procedurally generated planets to find a mysterious relic. By harvesting and gathering resources, you can upgrade your character, your tools, and so on. When enemies invade in different waves, you need to head back up to your dome in order to protect it, or you're going to lose. The game has seen several updates already over 2022, and the roadmap shows a lot of promise, including a supposed multiplayer and co-op mode coming down the line. What I really like about Dome Keeper is that from a moment-to-moment standpoint, this game is very solid. The aesthetics, the presentation, and the gameplay are all firing on all cylinders. Despite the hectic nature of it, there's definitely this zen-like nature as you dig into the mountain or dig into the ground, gather your resources, and try to figure out your best plot down and then back up. The different tools and so on that have been added to the game are not like simple like copy pasting or just changing a few stats. They are fundamentally different gear that completely change what your strategy or your build will be. One item allows you to slow enemies down and even delay waves, while another one can give you a protective shield, so that your dome takes less damage, which means you can spend less resources having to repair it. Right now, I believe there are 2 weapons, a gun or laser gun and a sword, and I'm sure there's more coming down the line. But the game definitely goes for a very qualitative updates as opposed to quantitative, with, throwing in 30 more weapons and 27 more enemies and that kind of thing. What keeps it from number 1 is not anything that I would say makes Stonekeeper bad, but it's just as lacking, I think, in terms of variance. Because of kind of the connectivity between the defense out on the top and digging all the way down, you're not given as much wiggle room in terms of having different strategies. If you're playing this on the higher difficulties when the waves come even faster, you pretty much have to play this almost perfectly in terms of knowing what upgrades to get, where I should kind of dig and focus, and even like what items will work best for your supposed strategy. Now, I would love to see more variance added in terms of mini events that can show up. Again, just essentially more of everything, so the runs aren't as cut and dry. But if you are looking for a really solid example of what roguelike design can add, and a very enjoyable game as well, highly recommend Stonekeeper. So with that said, coming in at number 1, considering that one of my all-time favorite action roguelikes is The Binding of Isaac, number 1 should be a pretty solid guess from some of the fans here. I'm giving it to Cavity Busters. While the game from the outside could be easily compared to the kind of the gross-out humor of A Binding of Isaac, Cavity Busters definitely makes it with a far more greater, technical gameplay compared to Isaac and some of the other action roguelikes we've played. This is not a game that's so much about you snowballing in terms of, I'm going to pick up overpowered item A to get me overpowered item B and C, and now I'm just destroying everything. It's more of, we're going to throw a bunch of weird stuff at you, and how can you manage it? The game features iframe dodging, the ability to shoot your tooth out, your molar, use it as a boomerang, jump off enemies to then rain death down from above. Each level is full of multiple secrets, there's hidden bosses, and so on. But what I really enjoy the most about this game from a roguelike perspective is the variance of the runs, and that comes in the form of the diseases. Because you are exploring a human body, every room has a chance of dropping a disease, and these diseases range very wildly in terms of what they can do to you, to the enemies, and to the game itself. And you'll need to decide, do I take this disease on, make the game some way harder for me? Do I leave it alone and just make the entire game harder? And some of them are just nasty, such as those that penalize you for standing still, using walls, enemies exploding bullets, and so on. But the beauty is that if you can get the disease cured, you keep all the benefits, while all the negative aspects that hurt the enemies stay on. So the game really leans into a very solid risk versus reward take. And you never know, again, when a disease will show up, and again, weighing that pros and cons, because some of these are quite frankly run killers. Such as if you get one that causes you to take damage every time you go between a new door. Bosses are also on the challenging side. The game leans more into bullet hell and shmup dodging than you might assume just by looking at the screenshots. And you have to get pretty good in terms of dodging when you get to some of the final boss with like wave after wave after wave after wave of his patterns. But the game is certainly an interesting take. And if you do enjoy kind of like that, how escalated can we go kind of action roguelike like the Binding of Isaac did, then Cavity Busters gets a really solid thumbs up from me. And we shall see where the roguelike genre goes into 2023. But with that said, thank you for watching today's episode. Slowly but surely, we are getting to the end. If you enjoy things, be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what are some of your favorite roguelikes and any that I missed in 2022. Check out our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games.